Dave in San Francisco. Hey, Dave, what are you doing?
Hi, how are you guys? Great game, love the Niners. I wish they could, sack the quarterback. I was watching Mayfield for the Bills get sacked. For Tampa Bay, and I saw the Bills quarterback get sacked, and quarterbacks were going down all over the place. I just haven't seen that lately with SF. I'd love to see Bosa and Green get some sacks this coming weekend against Goff.
Of course, Dave.
Yeah, Dave.
I wish I could figure out what's going on. I can't. I don't Here's the other thing. I know you love the PFF grades.
Sure.
Apparently, Chase Young played well.
Okay.
That's what PFF says. And there's more to a pass rush than sacks. Obviously. There's pressures, there's hits. These things all count. And there were a lot of those from the 49ers. But to have that group out there, Hargrave, Armstead, Young, and Bosa, and come away with 0 sacks in any game feels impossible.
Right.
The Green Bay offensive line was fantastic in this game, and it's never a sexy thing to say, but it's true. Football is about the offensive line. You will be a very good team if you have good offensive line play, and Detroit has a good one too. These quarterbacks, you make it to the league, and you're given time, you can make the throws. You can make all the throws. The only way that you can trip these guys up is to pressure them, and that's why Jordan Love looked the way that he did in the first half. They pressured him a little bit more in the second half. They forced him into some mistakes. Obviously, the game flow was part of that too. But I wish I could understand what it is that's going on, what other teams have figured out to neutralize this 49er pass rush.
Well, Nick Bosa is not the game wrecker that he was last year. And, Chase Young, while PFF can say he had a great game, he had 3 tackles, and I saw him get washed out on many run plays his side, and he had no sacks. Nobody had a sack. You had no real pressure up the middle through the A-gap, which is Eric Armstead, and it's Javon Kinlaw and others, and Hargrave. They didn't have any real disruptive pressure. They brought some blitzes, but the Niners don't blitz very often. In the regular year, they were 3rd least in terms of blitz percentage. So they're trying to get home with 4, and if you don't get home with 4, then you're leaving it to the other 7 to rally up and tackle, and for the most part, they did. For me, the bigger problem is Ambry Thomas on the back end, and it's also the fact that, exactly. So if you want to talk about what the biggest issues in the defense were, yes, the D-line was not disruptive, and they were not great against the run, although I don't think that the run defense was as bad as everyone wants to say. To me, it was the 2 big PI plays down the field that allowed them to get it in position, and also the kick return. They got a kick return down to your 25-yard line, which was a huge play. Special teams were gigantic, and I asked Larry Krueger, on Friday, and he was lightweight dismissive of my question, saying, the Niners have a huge edge, Dibs, on special teams. And I was pointing out to him that the Packers were number 1 in the league in kickoff returns, and come to find out, the kickoff return was a huge play in that game and gave him 7 points.
He was also talking about their kicker, though, and he ended up being right about that. That was Don't
defang me right now.
I'm just
Stop
saying.
whopping me.
It got him.
I put him in his place on Friday. I was right. Special teams were a huge Green Bay edge.
I will again point out
huge.
That you cannot be right when simply asking a question. That's not a point. That's a question.
It was a pointed question.
Yeah. Okay.
Which is what I do, Mark.
Yeah, I know. Here's Nick Bosa on the D-line's performance.
Well, it was a grind. I think I left everything out there, and I was getting to the quarterback a little bit. He was getting rid of it. There was a lot of chips. Didn't really get into the game that we wanted to play as a D-line. Wanted to get some points and kind of have a lead there to really get after him. But he was getting rid of it, and he's a really good quarterback. So.
Yep. I mean, that's... You hear that over and over, and I know to the point where it bothers some 49er fans, but the game plan, it sounds so stupid when you say this out loud. The game plan is to get the lead, which is always the game plan. The game plan is to score more points than the other team.
Get the lead, keep the lead.
But get the lead, and it changes what you can do. I mean, look, why did Jordan Love throw an interception on the last drive?
Because he was feeling desperation.
Maybe.
They were down.
You could also argue he did not want to lead. They only needed a field goal to tie. Maybe he didn't want to go for a field goal because his kicker's not very good. Why did Baker Mayfield, when he got the ball down 8 with 2 minutes to go, second pass, intercepted? It feels like Brock Purdy in Minnesota. This has happened a number of times. When you have the ball late and you are down a score and you are trying to move down the field, it feels like 65% of the time it leads to an interception. Why? Well, because the other team knows exactly what you're going to do. They know that you have to throw, and therefore that allows them to call a package that sort of highlights it highlights pass rush, and it highlights looking over the middle with your linebackers and trying not to let receivers go over the top. So all of that often leads to interceptions. The 49ers got a lead in the second quarter, 7-3, but not like a lead. You know what I mean? They can get that 2-score lead. Would they sack Love a few more times? Maybe. So as usual, the 49ers playing a good first half and getting that 10-0 lead or whatever it is a big deal. It's a big deal. And I like their chances to get that a lot better this weekend.
Yeah, I wonder about that. And we can get into the Detroit game as we get deeper into the week, because I think that the Lions are more dangerous than the Packers were in terms of...
Why do you think that?
Because they've got better receivers. They've got as good, if not a better running game. And I think they have a coach who is willing to pull out all the stops and be a little bit more aggressive in terms of play calling, play selection, and going forward on fourth down.
I hear all that. They're a terrible pass defense. Terrible.
Yeah.
Like legitimately.
And the Niners may not have Deebo Samuel. So if
May
you're
not.
a bad pass defense, and I think in terms of the Niners, like in terms of how they like to approach the game, they don't want to attack you through the air very much in terms of their first priority. So no Deebo, and you have a bad pass defense, and you're going up against Ray, Jawan, Conley, and Ayuk, and Kittle.
And Kittle. And
McCaffrey.
And Christian.
I get that.
Yeah, they're fine.
It's not as dangerous
It's
as
not
if
as
you had
dynamic.
Deebo.
Sure, yeah. If you miss one of your top players, it's not as dynamic. Sure.
And I look at the 49ers pass defense, which has not been terrific across the board, although we do need to highlight Mooney Ward and that play on the opening drive on third down, the pass breakup in the end zone.
And Lenore had a good game too.
He sure did. And, Ambry Thomas had a tough game.
Oof.
And, that's going to be, I think, a thing that if I'm Detroit, I look at, and the Lions have weapons now.
Yeah, they do.
If you want to look at their weapons versus the Niners' weapons, it's pretty close. I mean, you take McCaffrey.
Yeah, they've got great weapons.
They've got two great different running backs.
They sure do.
They've got an elite pair of wide receivers and a great tight end. So
yeah, and I don't think this. Look, they're a dome team, so
that's a big factor.
Yeah, they're a dome team, so I'm not saying that they would handle rain or whatever. But again, as far as their pass defense, they'll be going on a dry field with the sun out.
Yeah,
and Deebo or not, the 49ers have no reason not to move the ball. They've got no reason not to move the ball. George in Los Altos here on Willard and Dibs. Hi, George. What are you doing?
Well, just thinking back about the game, and there was so much negative going on, but I also see a lot of positive. My biggest concern is Ambry Thomas was getting burned left and right to the point where he had to hug the receiver and get a penalty as opposed to giving up a touchdown pass. That concerned me a lot. And the cornerback position, other than Charvarius Ward, continues to be a concern, as is the pass rush. Having said that, on the positive side, we played a really hot team, a confident team coming in to the game in Green Bay. They had nothing to lose. They were loaded for bear when they came in, and you could tell right off the bat. I think Matt LaFleur called a hell of an offensive game plan, a great plan. And they had us on our heels for a long time, and Brock was through what should have been picks. But you know what? At the end of the day, he got it together. He came back under control. He led us down the field in the fourth quarter, chewed up a clock, and we scored the winning touchdown. I think that's going to do a ton for his confidence. I also think that we'll beat the Lions. I'd love to have Debo, but even without Debo, I think we'll squeak by because Jared Goff is very immobile. And if our pass rush finally comes together, I think we'll put pressure on him and we'll end up winning that game. So I look at the way we ended it as opposed to the way we played for the first three quarters. And that's what gives me hope going into next week. And if Debo comes back and we meet the Ravens in the Super Bowl, let's not forget, we had 258 yards of total offense against the Ravens in the first half. And we're not going to throw 5 picks.
No, they moved the ball against the Ravens. Great, George, you're not wrong. That's a good breakdown. You know, we had a number of people from Mark Schlereth who said he went back over that game. I know that, Greg Cosell with NFL Films has said the same thing, that if you watch the tape of the Niners-Ravens game, it's a little bit of a weird game. Like the Niners were moving the ball up and down the field. Their stats were actually fantastic. Batted balls are a part of the deal. They got in Brock's face. Those batted balls also happen to land in arms. But I don't think that there's concern about the ability to move the ball against the Ravens if the Niners are so fortunate enough to get there, if the Ravens are fortunate enough to get there. My bigger concern would be Lamar. Like if you've got a pass rush that is not performing at a high level, if they get by this one, Patrick Mahomes or Lamar are both going to be a complete and total headache. I will say this, I checked in with my guy because after a performance like this, remember last week we said if the Niners play the Ravens, the Niners would be a 3.5-point favorite. Mm-hmm. Then the Ravens go out and win by a ton. And the Niners have a game where it felt like they lucked out. And so I said, any change? Spread change between the Niners and Ravens? What do you think?
No change.
A little bit of change. 3.
Instead of 3.5.
Down to 3.
Yeah, but not past the magic number of 3, down to 2.5. And, it all depends on what the matchup tells you. And I think that even though the Niners had no sacks yesterday, and you look at the stats, QB hits, Nick Bosa had 5 of their 6 QB hits, which tells you that by and large they didn't have much pressure outside of Nick Bosa, and yet you only gave up 3 touchdowns. And one of those touchdowns was on a short field, and it was a short field created by your special team. So the defense, everyone wants to rip the defensive line. Yeah, they didn't generate any real pressure. They had no sacks. And the run game, yeah, first time in 51 games, the opponent had a 100-yard rusher in the game. Those two things are not good, yet you only gave up 2 touchdowns. In the red zone, you were pretty stout.